Hello, everybody. Good day. How is everybody doing? I hope you're doing well. I am Twos. You're probably seeing this on either one of my channels or the Mashup channel or Sean's channels. We're about to go live to Shane Getson, UCP MLA for St. Anne and Parklands, and also the party whip. And he is doing a town hall talking about basically what matters to you. He's coming live. This is coming live from a small town bar in the middle of oil country. This is the Iron Lady Saloon in Gainford. For those of you who know, it's right on the Yellowhead. And he's just doing some preparatory statements. The music's still just kind of toning down. But for those of you watching, any of the comments you guys put in are going to be going to them. And so they'll be able to, hopefully, I don't know how many questions he's going to get, probably a lot. But if you have a question for him that you want him to speak to, I don't know, something about the G7 or peace in the Middle East or chemtrails or whatever, something to do with the economy, it's an open town hall for you to ask him anything that's on your mind. Shane, for those of you who don't know, I would say is easily the most plain-spoken MLA that we have in Alberta, probably in just about the country. And so he's one of those guys who is going to be speaking honestly and accurately to what's going on. So any comments, questions, whatever, the staff that's helping him out tonight is going to be seeing them, and then they'll be able to pass them on to him. And we're going to go over to it right now and see what he has, where he's at in the conversation and the introductions and whatnot.
I'll just say sir or something like that, but we also have the Mayor of Stony Plain, William Choi. We have Reeve Joe Blakeman. We've got Councillor Gablehouse. It's like I Spy at this point. We have the Mayor of Mayorthorpe, Mayorthorpe's mayor. And who else did I miss? We had some school board trustees out here too. Lori, where'd you get to? There we go. There's our chairman of Parkland School Division, Lori. Lorraine Stewart. Got that? I just changed your name. Sorry, Lorraine. Who else did I miss? Kevin Lovich. Oh, Kevin Lovich. Kevin's in the back. You didn't raise your hand. Kevin, councillor from St. Anne as well.
Aileen Wagner, trustee from Parkland School Division, is also here. And Mark Francis, our deputy superintendent from Parkland School Division. And then there are two trustees from Grand Yellowhead who are here as well.
We got everybody here tonight. This is good. All right. So, it's been a spell. So maybe what I'll start off with, there was a couple folks, they said they hadn't seen us for about a year. Oh, we got Councillor over here as well from Onaway, Sheila. Now she's a Toronto fan. So no. If there's anybody that really believes and works hard and digs in, that's a Toronto fan, because every year they pull out that sweater, and it hasn't been since old Billy Barilko in '52 that they won the cup, but they come out every year and they end up cheering on the Oilers every year at the end. And Tyler Mason as well from Mayorthorpe Council. Okay, we got everybody in the house. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just kind of go through some of the things that we've been working on in the last year. And for those of you who don't know, I'm also the Premier's Parliamentary Secretary. So the Parliamentary Secretary for Economic Corridor Development. Now that's kind of a neat way of saying the person who gets to talk to the other ambassadors, the councillors, the consulate generals. I get to work in the Transboundary group. So in the US, I kind of heard all of our MLAs that we belong to there. And then when the Premier can't make a speech or do something like that, she ends up calling me and I end up doing those as well. Now the logic behind that might sound a little counterintuitive, at least it did to me at the first part, but not when you actually start to realize that Albertans are actually pretty straightforward, straight shooting folks, and that's apparently what the world is looking for these days. Some of the doors, absolutely. So some of the doors that have been opened and afforded to me have been just kind of bonkers. Like there was this group from Japan that came over, and here we are, we're sitting at this big thing, and Speaker Cooper had us all together, and I don't speak Japanese. A bunch of these fellows, they don't speak English, and we've got Google Translate going. And lo and behold, you go back to your basic roots. Turns out we both come from farming families. So we're sitting with the folks from Japan talking about farming, and then that ends up turning into an invitation for the Emperor's birthday, and I'm going down to this event down in Calgary. So all of a sudden it's the ambassador of Japan, and I'm sitting there kind of wandering around a bit, and then this lady, she's the honorary consulate general for Finland, and she's been around forever. She grabs me, we start talking about the Arctic, we start talking about these corridors, and she literally put me in a receiving line. So everybody was either going to go grab a drink or a sandwich or a snack. She was bringing them over to him and introducing me, and all of a sudden I met the entire consulate corps from Calgary. And then that translates into the ones in Edmonton, and then all of a sudden that ties into their ambassadors, and lo and behold, then I'm getting invited to the High Commissioner of England when they're at Spruce Meadows. Now here's a little bit of a story, because you got to tell some stories and do that. So I fly aircraft as well, and a lot of times it's the best thing that you can ever do, but there's an old saying, it says if you have time to spare, go by air, because something invariably happens. So here I am, trying to short-circuit the system, flying down to Calgary. I've got a friend that's going to send over a friend of hers to pick me up at the Airdrie Airport. So I'm literally going in, I'm wearing jeans, I go into the terminal building, I get changed into my suit, and I forgot something in my blessed aircraft. So I go and I reach up on the wing, and it's like, we're running tight for time. Like, I got to be at this event, got to meet all these high mucky muck folks and everything else, and go do this. And I reach up on the aircraft, and I hear this rip. Yeah, one of those moments, right? So you kind of figure, well, how is this going to work out? So the car rolls up, and I'm kind of seeing if there's any breeze back there or what's going on. And it didn't seem too bad, and I don't have another change of pants, and like, what are you going to cancel and fly back home? Like, so I'm kind of sneak in, and I'm covering my coat down and doing that kind of stuff. And it was about a half-hour drive to get from Airdrie down to Spruce Meadows. By the time we got there, I got to know the lady really well enough anyway at this point. And we get out of the car, and I'm going, well, I said, Carolyn, you seem like a really nice person. I got to ask a favor of you. And she goes, what's that? And I said, can you see if I've got a really bad wardrobe malfunction or if there's something else? And she goes, well, what do you think? I said, I think I ripped the seat out of my pants. So now she's busting a gut laughing. So we're in the parking lot, and I'm doing one of these, and she's checking to see how bad it was. Wasn't so bad, but she had some tape in the car, so I guess, ladies, you guys are really good at this, wardrobe malfunctions and such. So she kind of gives me a little bit of tape, so for the rest of the day, I'm kind of making sure, and I'm conscious, and I'm walking around doing this, sitting down, not trying to meet too many people. And the consulate general from Britain, he comes up, and a really nice young man, I'd met him and his wife at another event at Stampede. He says, well, the High Commissioner wants to see you, and I'm like, oh yeah. So the High Commissioner from England, she's coming up and wants to talk, and I'm thinking, well, this is good. It'll be like 2 minutes, maybe at most. I'll kind of stand like this. Well, lo and behold, she wanted to talk. And she wanted to talk for about half an hour. There was literally ambassadors lining up wanting to talk to her. And what she wanted to talk about was all the innovations, all the things Alberta was doing. And she said of all the places that she travels in the country, Alberta is the place, because that's the place where she has hope, and that's the place where people get things done. So there I am, hanging with my butt in the breeze, but we're talking to the High Commissioner of England, and that's the reputation we have. So on this corridor file, the last pitch I did with the Premier, like it was 5 years ago, and we had a different Premier at that time, and I took the pitch of these corridors, these economic corridors of tying in across the country, getting up to that north, getting to the Arctic Ocean, getting over into the Pacific. And the Premier at that time said, it'll never happen, Shane, it's a pipe dream. And I said, well, with all fairness, Premier, every pipeline project I started out on was a pipe dream. So we're going to keep pushing on this. And then Premier Smith came in, she saw the plan, and all of a sudden she made transportation become transportation and economic corridors. And 11 of the ministers had a mandate, and then she scooped me up and made me her parliamentary secretary specifically for that file. The next iteration of this model, there's going to be 3 big legs to it. Because what I tell folks is it's not good enough just to stay in our province, it's not good enough just to stay in Canada. So one dusty cowboy boot sticks in Alberta, and the other one's touching salt water somewhere, and it doesn't have to be on our own shoreline. So 3 big pillars that I'm going to work on and have been, and this is the next push for the next couple of years here. First one is Fortress North America. There is no reason why Mexico, Canada, and the US can't be 100% self-sufficient. We can't trade and do everything else all between us. Now this model was first presented, the first time I heard about that was literally in 2009 when I was in Enbridge, and we had a retired Air Force colonel sitting up on stage talking about how the Department of Defense in the US looks at the North American footprint, and more specifically Alberta. We are part of their strategic supply. Regardless of borders and lines and everything else, when you have a military context, that's where the grown-ups actually have that conversation. So Fortress North America kind of planted in my mind back then, and I've been saying it ever since. And our role in that is I'm always saying now we're the gateway to the north. So the north is where everything is going to get really spicy in the next number of years. You've got a ton of different countries out there building icebreakers that are in warm port water all year long. And the reason for that is that ice is melting up there, and it's the shortest distance for any route on the planet that we want to do business with. So when you have the likes of China, India, Korea, Japan building icebreakers and claiming Arctic nation status, there's a reason for that. Now the Panama Canal runs on fresh water. I'm not sure if most folks know that. It runs on fresh water. They're running a little shy of fresh water there. So it costs you an awful lot to get your boat in the water to try to get it across, and it takes a long time, and there's massive congestion. Mexico is building a rail line that's going to short circuit some of that traffic, but when you look at the issues that took place, it's 100 and some odd years old now, that canal. All the boats have to be skinny enough to go down the canal. With the Arctic Ocean opening up, you don't have those restrictions. You can make your boats as big as you want. You save time, at least 10 days per trip is what's happening there. And you've got that ocean water that's getting opened up, and our ice-breaking technology is better. So that's why there's such a big push up there. The other thing that we used to do for Arctic sovereignty back in the 70s and 80s was we did exploration. So the likes of Gulf and Dome Petroleum and Exxon and a bunch of folks, they all worked up there, and they found all these really high-producing wells, really good material up there as well. And what I've been told by that generation, that group that did it, they said one well in the territories is equal to 10 wells in Alberta. That's literally the volumes that they have up there. Now the other thing is rare earth elements and minerals. We've got a ton of minerals up there, and rare earth elements and gold and palladium and everything else that we need. China over the last number of years has actually cornered that market. So if you're looking at securing your logistics and your supply lines, this starts to make a ton of sense. So you got everybody going over the top. You're going to have the whole world fishing fleet moving that way, because as a marine biologist told me, fish aren't stupid, they're actually pretty smart. If they're good for, +5 temperature water, they're not going to hang around +10 temperature water, they're just going to go further north until they find +5 temperature water. So ergo, the entire fishing fleet moves with it as well. So you're going to have all this massive traffic going up in our backyard, and if we're not paying attention to it, guaranteed everyone else is, and they're just going to plant a flag in it, do whatever, and put up stakes. So we're going to be paying attention to the Arctic. We're also going to be paying attention a lot to Northern Europe. So the Nordic nations, we have a lot in common with them. Premier sent me over to Reykjavik, of all places, first time I've been there. Anyone been to Reykjavik? Okay, cool, a couple folks. Really neat place. Kind of neat to see what they've done there, but it's also kind of a central point. Like Iceland it's the Arctic, but it's not. It's like a warm Arctic over there on that side of the ocean. It's actually a lot more temperate than I ever thought it would be. But when you have people from all around the world coming there and converging, there was about 2,500 people at this conference, and they're all talking about how the Arctic and how things should be taken care of. Now, coincidentally, it was one of the first times Alberta was ever there. Usually it's the government of Canada, and you've got select folks that they invite. And we actually have an embassy there. So picture this. The night before this big conference is kicking off, Team Canada. Everyone's on Team Canada? All right, so everybody on Team Canada. Team Canada shows up, and they got everybody invited, and I know I'm on the list because there's security to get into it. And they got a little podium there, and the lady's doing her thing, and all of a sudden she goes around and announces, the Premier of Northwest Territories, and she announces a couple MPs from Ottawa and a couple other from Quebec, and then she just bypassed that 6'2" pipeline right in front. So that was kind of the first shot across the bow, finding out that if we're not in their room, that we have to be, and we have to represent ourselves. It was a little bit later in the conference, and there was Government Affairs Canada, and this lady was so bold as to say, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, read the card that I gave you, what does it say?" And she goes, "Well, Alberta Chief Government Whip, Parliamentary Secretary." I said, "Of Economic Corridor Development." I said, "Oh." I said, "What's the next part?" I said, "Where's Alberta located?" "Well, it's north of Montana." I said, "It's in Canada, right?" "It's in Canada?" So you remember that whole gateway to the north thing? I said, "So quite honestly, I think I'm closer to the north than you are sitting in Ottawa. So what Alberta's going to do is we're going to be here and we're going to continue to talk to people." So those are some of the things that we run into. It's not everybody, but those are the pockets. And if we're not in those rooms, then that's what happens. There was another panel that was taking place, and they were literally talking about the fires in Jasper. And I was covering for Marty Long. He had some family things he had to take care of. So literally the first day that we could get in there, I was there with the Premier and with Mike Ellis, Minister Ellis, and everything else, and with the Mayor of Jasper, and looking at all of that, and dealing with a little bit to a degree of the federal minister on the ground as well. So 100% that could have been prevented, in my opinion. All those dead trees, we've been talking about them for years. There was a ton of Keystone Cop things that took place there that didn't have to happen. So when I go to this stage now, and I'm over in Reykjavik, and there's a member of parliament that's down there from Eastern Canada, and they're using Jasper as an example of why we have to shut in the energy sector because of all this climate crisis. I couldn't contain myself, and I'm kind of grumbling and making noise at this one table, and the person's asking me about it, and kind of talking to him a bit, and kind of said what I said to you folks: this is preventable. We're sitting there virtue signaling while people's houses are burning. We're not doing the right things. We got to clean up forestry. We got to take care of the bug kill and everything else. And I'm going, well, who are you with? Watch him with National Geographic. I would love to hear your story. Perfect. Yes. So those are the type of things when you make these connections. The next one that was really neat is Senator Murkowski. She's up in Alaska country, and she's been pushing for this ice pact. So for Canada, Finland, and the US to build these icebreakers. So we end up tagging up with her again, talking about the Arctic Pact and everything else, and then I'm finding out who the shipbuilding company is. Now it turns out it's a company by the name of Davies. They're based out of Finland. They used to do all the icebreaker building for Russia, and they used Canadian technology to do it because us silly Canadians never thought we'd start building our own icebreaker, so we sold the tech to the Finns. The Finns were building for the Russians. The Russians did what the Russians are doing, and all of a sudden their contracts dried up. So now you got this ice pact. They want to build icebreakers, but our shipyards haven't built things for such a long time. They're running into scheduling issues. So when I talked to the guy from Davies, and I'm going, I think I got a solution for your problem. I was talking to the senator. You got a ton of red tape that's going on. You have issues with your productivity line. I said, I got the right place for you to do this. And he goes, where's that? And I said, Alberta. And he looks at me, he goes, what? He says, where is your ocean? I said, we don't have an ocean. But I said, we got fitters, we got welders, we got boilermakers, and I'll tell you what, we build a lot of stuff. And I said, all I see when I see one of your icebreakers is just simply a double-walled pressure vessel that sits on its side. And all that thing does is just beaches itself like a big old whale. And I said, and all of your technology inside is simply a fluid transfer system. So you're sucking water and you're making this thing rock back and forth, and that's how you're breaking the ice. He goes, yeah. And I said, well, the best part about our province, I said, is if you're in North America and you need any big pressure vessels, I said, they come to Edmonton Exchanger. We've got the biggest mandrels in North America. We build all the stuff for the Texans. We build all the stuff. It all goes down there. I said, we're all integrated. We got big highway systems. We got the productivity that you can get this done. So we got the roads, the rail, all those type of things. And I said, and you're paying in Canadian dollars. So you get 30 points discount off the USD right off the hop. And he's looking at me and going, he says, well, we were actually thinking about Texas. I go, we're Texas North. So don't you worry about it. Us in Texas get along great. But I said, here's how I think you can do it. I said, and then we can mod these things up, ship them out to the coast, you stitch them together, and lo and behold, you got yourself a boat. So these are the type of conversations that we're actually having, that people are trying to figure their way out of it. So again, the gateway to the north, we can do a ton of things that they're not in our comfort zone normally, just because we haven't done them, but it doesn't mean we can't. And when we did a little study on that aerospace and aviation file, it was similar. We had this consultant out of Kissimmee, Florida, look at little old Villeneuve Airport, and we found out, lo and behold, that our skill sets that we have in our industry are 80% transferable to aerospace and defense. So we started really looking at that. That news spread, and our government has been working on it. Now we're actually building water bombers in southern Alberta again. So we're actually garnering stuff to come over here, and we're building things. And then I went to Germany. So we belong to this group called the Council of State Governments, and it was started about 83 years ago in the US. It was all US states. They started getting a little tired of their federal overreach. Sound familiar? Yeah. So Saskatchewan and Alberta, Manitoba and Ontario, we were latecomers on the Midwest, but we joined that group. And with that, I was sitting on some energy councils there for them as well, and I got invited to go with a bunch of US senators and representatives over to Germany. So Germany invites us to come on over and to take a look at their energy transition file. So here we are. Everyone keeps talking about how you need to do more solar panels, more windmills, how you have to build out the electrical grid, go into more electric cars. And every level of government we went into, I'm like, what is your percentage of failure? How much probability of what is your percentage of risk? And the numbers kept coming back with 30%, 30% failure, 30% that we're not going to do this. Well, who's figuring out the problem? Well, somebody else. Well, why are you doing this? Well, because we have to. Why do you have to? Well, we don't want nuclear. Okay, but is that a have to or a want? Well, what are you doing with your coal? You're burning this lignite stuff. I said, well, we wouldn't even scratch the surface for that junk. I said, it's just peat moss is all that is. Like, we wouldn't be using that. They still have their lignite plants running because they've got a deficit of power and they're having to buy nuclear off of the French, and there's a bunch of these other things, but they keep running down this road. So I end up sitting across the table from an energy minister, same conversation. I end up sitting with, there was another presenter, was Tyson Krupp. Anyone been in an elevator lately? You look at the door, it's Tyson, or it's a Krupp elevator. You know, they build heavy equipment, they have forever. Well, they build some of the best steel in the world. And they've got these big steel plants over there, and they're switching all over to hydrogen. And I'm sitting in this room with 20 people, all these really nice politicians and these bureaucrats and everybody else. And one of the chief officers from Tyson Krupp is giving this presentation on how they're going to do this hydrogen build. And I'm looking at this, and then finally I stopped him halfway through it, and I'm going, is this right? Like, really? This is what you're going to do? You're going to stop using metallurgical coal. You're going to, your blast furnaces now, you're deficient in hydrocarbons, you're deficient carbon for your steel, so you're going to have new problems with your steel. And he goes, oh no, we won't. I'm like, guaranteed you will. Till you get that secret sauce. You've been building good steel for hundreds of years, and now you're going to change how you do it. And then you're going to do it with the hydrogen, but you're going to use water to do it, and you're going to use windmills to crack it off, and then you're going to have to reheat it with electrodes again because you can't get it hot enough to make it molten. I said, so you're going to use about 20 to 30 times more energy than what you are now? He goes, yeah. So now the politicians around the table, they're looking at this because we all heard that how everyone's going to have to turn down their thermostats for 2 days, how they're all going to have to take the bus and transit, and how you can't have an internal combustion engine, and they're going to use 30% more energy. I'm like, why are you doing this? Because we have to. The government's telling us we have to. And when we talk to some of the politicians there at the municipal level, and you guys will get this, I'm going, well, how do you make your folks comply? Well, punish them if they don't. I'm going, well, I wouldn't fly in our area. So it's a different culture. And then I ended up sitting at a table. There was a supper, and there was a gentleman by the name of Michael Cruz, I should say. He took us around, really good politician. He took us through the Buchenstadt. And he told us how there was a coalition, the government. There was the Reds, the Greens, and the Yellows, so literally the traffic lights before this last election, and how they had such tenuous relationships and how they had to try to make this work. Well, lo and behold, this lady comes in, and she comes late to the party, and these two, they start exchanging words in German, and I'm looking at this, and it's like fur's gonna fly or something. I'm kind of, how are things, Michael? And he goes, oh, no, it's okay. He says, she's the leader of the Green Party. I just told her tonight we're all on the same team because we have guests. I go, okay, good. So I sit down and she sits right beside me, and I'm thinking, well, this is good. I'll get to talk about our hydrogen roadmap. I'll get to talk about what we do in our province. I'll talk about the energy transition, how we can help them out with their hydrogen file, how we can get them metallurgical coal if they need it. And well, lo and behold, she didn't know anything about our government, but she knew everything about the other governments. Very much tied in with what was happening in Ottawa, and very much tied in with what our opposition was. And every time I talked about something, she told us we were doing it all wrong. So after about 45 minutes of this, me trying to be nice and talk through it, I said, okay. I said, we got to clear the air here. I said, firstly, I'm going to tell you about my province, because you don't know much about it. It's abundantly clear. I said, we're in the latter part of October. I said, back home, I'm wearing a winter coat. I said, when you think about our weather, think about Siberia. We're the most northern, Edmonton's the most northern city. I said, anywhere in the planet, we're actually there. I said, the next part is, we've got an abundance of natural gas and an abundance of coal. I said, the coal that you guys have, we wouldn't even scratch the ground for it. We got highest quality metallurgical coal plus thermal coal. I said, we shut it down. We got so much gas, I said. We've got hundreds of years of gas. We haven't even tapped into it. The US, I said, they're a big country. They get 99% of their gas imports from us. They get well north of 53 to 60% of their imported oil comes from us. You take the top 3 countries in the world that supply the US oil, we're bigger than all of them. I said, to get here, it took me about 11 hours flying. I said 7 hours of it was just to get out of my own country. And then, I said, we crossed a little bit of the ocean. I said, and then we hit the Dutch coastline. I said, we were at your place in half an hour. I said, we literally, my province is twice the size of your country. You've got 85 million people, we got 4.8 million people at that time. We're up to about 5 million now. I said, we've got 4.8 million people. I said, our largest polluter is not our energy sector. I said, our largest polluter is forest fires. And that year, I said, we burnt off pretty near the size of Switzerland, and we're still 62% forested. I said, we do all the beef, 70% of the beef in the country comes from us. I said, between us and Saskatchewan, we're the breadbasket of half the world. I said, so tell me what, if Germany had all the resources and the low population that we had, you think we'd be talking about windmills and solar panels right now? So it was crickets. It was that mic drop moment. I said, I thank you very much. I know you're going to COP28. I can't wait until you meet our Premier Danielle Smith there. I'm going to tell her to look for you. And Rebecca Schultz is going to be there as well, and I can't wait to send you our hydrogen roadmap and all these things. I said, with that, I'm going to excuse myself. Got it from the table. Michael, he was over, and you got to understand, these are high caliber politicians, really good people, very formal, very rigid, very proper. And he's out by the coat rack, and I said, Michael, I said, brother, I got to shake your hand a second time. And he goes, why? I said, I just spent 45 minutes with her. Wow. He goes, she's freaking crazy. She wants to shut everything down. She wants to, he starts going through the economy. He says all this stuff. I said, brother, I said, tell you what, you guys are looking for a partner. We're your partner. We can help you out with the gas. I said, if you're looking for your industries to have a safe harbor to come and do that, we can do that. I said, we're not going to do what you guys are doing. I said, we've got an abundance of this. We've got tons of spaces. So let's keep in touch. I thought I caused an international incident at that point. Like, honestly, I'm on the phone and texting back to let anybody know what I said, because, you got a kid from Wildwood out there talking on the world stage to people, so that's always a good sign. But saying, here's kind of what we're up to. Lo and behold, the Germans sent over 2 separate delegations since then, and we were sitting down at the table talking with them in the office there about how we could try to supply the gas lines. So that's why we're taking a look at Europe as well. Now, anybody heard of President Trump? Yeah, he's a good guy. He's an East Coast businessman. Honestly, he is. I did a little project down in Philadelphia back in my earlier career, and we were building a big tank farm there, and we were putting in a train set, and we had to deal with a bunch of folks from Philadelphia area. And I went into this one boardroom meeting. I literally had my butt handed. Like, these guys were so aggressive. It was just wild. And one of the project managers, Jeff Watt, God rest him, he passed a couple years ago. Really good guy. He was out of Oklahoma, and he took me to the side and took me out for supper that night. And he says, I ran a tank farm, he says, for British Petroleum for about 15, 20 years down the East Coast. He says, you're kind of like us from the Midwest. And I'm going, yeah, maybe. And he goes, no. He says, you ever dealt with Easterners before? I said, well, in our guys, Newfoundlanders and Maritimers. I said, yeah. He says, no, he says, these are different. And he says, well, in his kind of accent, he says, I'll tell you what. He says, you got to remember something about these fellas. He says, they're all spit and vinegar until you come out and give them a whack in the head. He says, and then they'll turtle up because they're a bunch of pussies. His words, not mine, so it was live stream. He says, so that's what you got to do. He says, and you got to remember another thing about us down here. He says, we serve in the military. He says, there's about 25-30% of our population is served. So he says, they'll do a bunch of that stuff until you say you're making an order or direction. So the next meeting I go into, literally, was like that. I go into this meeting, and I'm like, okay, well, these guys started lipping off, and I just snapped on them, came right out of the skates, set the tone, and just crossed the table a couple of these, and whoop, that was it. I'm going, holy crap, this actually works. So then we went over to another group, it was Matrix. They built a ton of tanks down there, and I went to one of these vice presidents. I said, so this deal, I said, like, this is what I was told. I saw these observations. He goes, oh yeah. He says, that's what we're like. He says, you're in Philly. We'll throw ice balls at Santa Claus in Philly. He says, not because we hate Santa, just because he's in Philly. So that's what I kind of took when I see President Trump and his administration. That's kind of how he is. He's very brash, he's very bold, he does those type of things. But he's also a builder. So he builds and he develops things. And if you can give him information, and if you can be trusted, you're not two-faced. He called him Two-Faced Trudeau for a reason. If you're not two-faced with them and you hold your ground and you say it respectfully and you educate them, you can get those types of those actions taking place. And because we didn't just wait for that administration, we were working on both sides of the aisle. Because of these transboundary groups, we built a bunch of friends up. And we had an event out at Aviation that we did, and it was a couple years back. We had some US senators, again, from that Council of State Governments group that we were over in Europe with. That was the same thing. We had other friends that were still from those areas. They came up. We did an event, we showed them around the area. At the end of the 2 days that they were with us, we had them up on stage, and I was playing the game show host, and they were talking to us, and I was asking them questions what they learned. Well, they were so fired up about Alberta, they said it's the energy, but it's not the energy in the ground, it's the energy of your people. Like the same thing that High Commissioner said. Like, there's an energy here. We had them at the universities, we had them at the tank farms, we had them out there. They were excited. Now, who knows Americans? Anybody have any American cousins or relatives? All right, they're a patriotic bunch, right? Like you got flags in every corner, everybody waves. You ever seen an American waving somebody else's flag before? They waved ours. We literally had autographs, and I gave them some hats, and we gave them some artwork, and some pictures that we took up. And Tammy Taylor did an awesome job of local artwork. I took some pictures from the plane, she painted them up, and I give these away as things to get a little piece of our community, so folks take it with us. We gave them some of these pictures, and then we gave them some Alberta flags. Without asking them, these guys stood up on stage and started waving the Alberta flag in their own fruition. Absolutely. So my American friend, that senator from Michigan, remembered that moment, and when he was afforded from his congressman a number of invitations to go see the inauguration for President Trump to be sworn in, I was one of 3 politicians that were down there under invitation to the U.S. So when all this tariff and the trade stuff was going back and forth, that's why we already had those channels. The Premier was bold enough, she used our connections. Obviously Jordan Peterson, there's another good Albertan who's a little bit brash, he was out there. We've got these connections behind it. We had a chance to talk to people because we were. And it's that old kitchen table politics that works. Sit down and have a coffee with somebody. Like I came around and talked to you guys first. I don't know how to do anything different. You got to talk to people rather than talking about them. So when we were doing that, here's how those other little connections paid off. The new ambassador of the U.S. is actually Roger Victory's constituent. He's a congressman, and President Trump called him up and said, "Would you be our ambassador to Canada?" "Well, yes, of course, sir." He goes into Roger's office to sign off on this thing. He brings his wife with him. His wife notices this little piece of artwork that's out over top of Lac St. Anne that has a couple geese flying over it. She goes, "What's with the Canada geese, Roger?" "Well, that's from my friend Shane in Alberta." "Alberta? Is that where that Danielle Smith is from?" He goes, "Yeah, we like her." Those are those little personal connections that pay off. So when they were talking about intonations of tariffs and everything else, we had that whole telephone system going in behind the scenes, trying to stave it off. So when I'm talking about Fortress North America, I'm talking about Fortress North America. The stuff that we need to do to talk and work together, because our economies are integrated, we've got friends and family on both sides of the borders. We're not going to all of a sudden elbows up this thing for a stupid political event and then mess up a relationship that's 100 years and some odd years old. Like when I met with the governor of Montana, it was the same thing. I gave him an Alberta belt buckle, and it's made by Montana silversmiths. So those are the connections, right? So literally, the governor of Montana gave us 45 minutes of his time, and he ended up writing a personal letter after we got back and thanking him for that. He gave us advice on how to deal with folks down there. I met with the real-life John Dutton, the guy that actually runs the, well, not Kevin Costner, the real cattle commissioner. We talked about how integrated our cattle system was. He says, a lot of folks don't realize the calf is born in Montana, it goes across the border to Alberta, you guys feed it up, we come back and slaughter it. If we have this whole tariff thing and this trade war, he says, we lose out on 40 to 50% of our business. We can't do that. And he says, the worst thing that can happen is politicians trying to mess up a business solution because business has already figured it out. When I'm driving down that highway, it's the first Special Forces highway. It's the very granddaddy of all the Special Forces, the Devil's Brigade, and it was in Helena, Montana. And when I'm driving down that highway at that time, I see Alberta forestry trucks ripping down the highway because they're off to California. We're integrated. And when I had a CTV reporter stalking me and trying to get an interview, and she needed half an hour of my time to see how bad it was with the Americans, one of the senators vacated his office and goes, "It's all yours, son." When I went into the Senate and they introduced us in that house, they gave us a standing ovation. Simply by saying there was MLAs from Alberta there, we received a standing ovation in the Senate. And then they asked us to speak at 4 different Senate committees, and that's kind of where they passed their laws. So that's like us having the legislation taking place, the Speaker of the House saying, "Okay, stop everything you're doing, let these guys from the US speak." It was significant. And I thought I'd do a little introduction back and forth, but it wasn't. It was, they wanted to talk, and it was 15, 20 minutes. And then when we got back, there was a Senate resolution that was passed on our behalf. So because of that interaction, we wrote the language for them in Montana, and so did Alaska, and so did Washington, wrote resolutions to their own federal government to say, make sure you take care of Alberta, make sure that we have good trade relations, because we actually need and we work really well together with each other. And when I tell this story to that CTV reporter, she wouldn't believe it. And then she goes, "Well, do you have any proof?" I said, "Well, they record everything there like we do." She goes, "Well, what was your first indication? What would you say that gave you the indication they're happy to have you there?" I go, "The standing ovation was a dead giveaway." And she goes, "Well, this is encouraging. Why aren't we hearing about it?" And I'm going, You're the reporter. Why aren't you printing it about it? Like, that's how backwards this has become. And she didn't. Lo and behold, she didn't do it because that's bad news, right? So that's what we're working on the Transboundary file. That's why we're trying to fortress North America. And that's why we managed to get your representative down into Washington and stumble around and meeting all these people. I went to the Watergate Hotel. That was a weird one. Got invited to go to the Watergate Hotel to meet with the Albanian ambassador to talk about getting energy over there so we could help Italy get a bunch of power. Like, it was just the most surreal week of being down there and meeting all these things, and the whole world was there, and Alberta was up on stage, forefront. Like, we were there talking to folks, they were doing things and dealing with us. Because again, when we carry our own weight and we talk to folks, it really happens. And then I did a trip over to India. So we had President or Prime Minister Modi came over here, which is significant. Like, the relations there for a number of years got really dicey. And it was Saskatchewan and Alberta that still had that really good conduit, that relation going there. Saskatchewan's had a phenomenal relationship with India for a number of years. So I go over, because we didn't want to mess up international relations, so I went over for a private vacation, took the cash out of my own pocket, and it meant that much to me to go over there on a trip. And I've been working with a bunch of folks from the Indian community for the last number of years. And you go to events like this, you meet common, like-minded people, and then what? Like, a politician takes the picture, and then you put it on Facebook, and then you never talk to him until the next meeting event. But you guys know that I'm not wired like that. So we started making these connections, and talking about business, and talking about interests, and a lot of really good cultural things that we figured out it was the same thing. Instead of having coffee, they drink tea. So I drink a lot of tea now, and we sit down, we talk about stuff, and that worked. So when these folks were telling me about their country and the connections, they said, you have to see it, Shane. You have to see it to believe it. So I asked them, would you go on a personal trip with me? Would you head over there? And they said, yeah, we think it's that important. They ponied up themselves and we went over this trip. And I was trying to keep low key, which is pretty funny. So I go over on this trip, I got a ball cap on, I'm wearing cargo pants, and I get off this long flight and I'm kind of walking through the line and filling out the forms, and I hear this, Shane? Daryl? I end up over there. There's the Minister of Agriculture for Saskatchewan. Him and I were on these CSG things together as well. And he's like, what are you doing here? I said, I'm here for Energy Week. I'm on a personal vacation. He goes, well, what are you doing here? He goes, I'm here in official business. We're actually doing a presentation at the High Commission on Pulse Crops. So that's where this thing started out. And then one of our professors that did our hydrogen roadmap, he's up on stage. So Dr. Anna Kumar is literally one of these representatives that's coveted around the world. So he's up there, and he's of Indian descent as well. He's up on stage, and he starts introducing me to people. One of those people was the Secretary of Energy for India. So that's the minister and the secretary are basically on the same rung, and the only one higher than that is Prime Minister Modi himself. So I end up in this meeting room, biggest meeting room I've ever seen in my life. It's at this conference center, little tiny conference. They've only been running it for 3 years. About 70,000 people showed up this year. Like, it's massive when you think of the order of magnitude. 70,000 people. Delhi has about 35, 40 million people in the area. Like, it's just orders of magnitude big. So we end up in this big meeting room, and they've got a Canada flag on my side, they've got an Indian flag on his side, and I just so happen to have some little Alberta pin flags. So I pulled in my bag and I said, well, before we do this, I said, here I'm on my own personal affair, sir. I'm not here representing the government, but I'm going to tell you about my province. And I planted the flag. And that's how we started the conversation. And what he explained to me was the way India thrives, he says that we work with the Russians and the US. So anything that you're talking about, any supply of energy, if you disrupt those, the whole thing falls apart, and we can't do that. Well, when I explained to him, I said, well, President Trump right now has Prime Minister Modi over. He goes, yep. I said, big billboards everywhere, big international news. I can see when I flew into the airport. He goes, yep. And he's trying to sell you $10 billion more of gas a year, right? He goes, yep. So where do you think he's getting that gas from? That would be my gas. But I said, we're not going to disrupt your supply. We're actually going to secure it. I told him about the corridors, and then he talked about our Indigenous and said how we can get anything built. And I talked about how they're actually on side with this model. And then I actually said, if I were you, and I'm looking for not just spot pricing, I said, if you're going to have a good trade agreement that lasts 70 to 80 years, what we should do is talk about building infrastructure back in my country. You help on the capacity. We've got barrels in kind. Does anybody know what that whole phraseology means, barrels in kind? Oh, yeah, really cool. Firstly, we're one of those outliers in the world where the province actually owns the assets. So we own the energy. You own those mineral assets and everything in the ground that belongs to you as the taxpayer. The way the government kind of gets in there representing you is typically in the past, we were just taking a cut. So other people were moving that oil back and forth on the royalties. We were just taking a cut of it however they traded it. What Premier Smith did, and Minister Jean, they came up with another way of doing that. It's barrels in kind. We've been doing that with our lights for a number of years. Now we're dealing with our heavies, and we're going to do the similar thing with our gas. That means we are the ones directing which countries or companies that we make those contracts with. We don't just leave it wholly to the market. So what that means is, when I'm talking to that energy secretariat, I said, if you ever went to Trudeau and wanted a pen to sign it, I said, he's out of ink. That ink is actually in the province, and that ink rests with my premier. So if you want to talk about energy, we're the ones you talk to directly. Well, then eyes get a little bit bigger. It's like, oh. I said, so actually you're kind of dealing with like Saudi Arabia, except it's Alberta. Like, this is how it works. We can make those deals. And I said, what we were doing with those barrels in kind, we've booked a bunch of capacity essentially to allow for new pipelines to be built. We've got these corridors now. They're the coolest thing going out there. Everyone's talking about these corridors. We're going to get those new items going, and we're going to get it to salt water. But in the interim, you can still do those contracts with us. You can still get it from the US, and you can secure your supply. So that changed the entire conversation right there. So when I went out of that room, he went into overtime another 15, 20 minutes with us, and I happened to have a lapel pin that was from the Alberta Ammonite that Wade Wokenfor had got for me a number of years ago. We're gonna have to order some more of those. I literally took that off my lapel and said, here, this is to remember us by. And he ends up giving me this nice bowl that was made in some religious type thing or anything else, and it was just beautiful, and we had this nice exchange, and I'm thinking, this is great. And then I go out in the hallway, and there's like 5 other countries lined up trying to talk to this guy. So that's the significance that we had there. The other one that was pretty wild was orders of magnitude again. Lac St. Anne, we have this event that takes place, the pilgrimage every year. Over 10 days, we get about 40,000 people to go there. It's kind of a big deal. Pope came, blessed the lake. It's God's country officially now. It is. We got the Pope blessed our lake. Like that's you can't get much more official than that. But 40,000 people show up. They had a similar event taking place at the same time. It goes over a 10-day period. And this year was something a little bit different. They had about, happens every 140 some odd years where the planets align or something like that. They were anticipating about 450 million people to go to it. But they undershot it because it turned out to be 630 million people went to it. So think about that. America has 440 some odd million people. We've got 44 million people. Not sure what Mexico has, but let's just say for argument's sake, the entirety of North America went to a 10-day event. So if you think that this was ever about the environment, about shutting down our industries, you're sorely mistaken. It was never about the environment, it's about a bunch of other narratives that have been hijacked. And I know that full well from being over in Germany, talking to these folks and seeing what's going on. What those folks want is good partners, good business partners going forward with, that we can have really decent conversation and build these inroads. So with that, I'm going to take a little bit of a pause. That's what I've been up to. And we just got back, oh yeah, one other thing. Just got back from Lloydminster because the first time, I think, since 1905, we got Saskatchewan and Alberta, all caucuses to get together to talk about what does Canada look like and how much do we agree in Saskatchewan and Alberta. And what we want to do there, obviously, is be very collaborative. We want to make sure that we're pretty much in lockstep on, I'd say, about 85, 90% of the stuff. It was more like a family reunion than anything else. And I kind of said to Daryl, I ought to bump into you in India again, not in Lloyd, one of those things. So we have all these connections that take place. Our premiers get along really great, and we're going to make sure that our new prime minister, realizes that it's time to fish or cut bait. That's where we're at here. We want to be part of the country 100%. We want our country to be the way it was intended to be, but you're going to have to take care of these items. It's not a nice to have. This is a need to have, and that's what we have to do. And I think the next thing I'm looking at, talking about the Arctic, is that we need to get deep sea port access. And I was looking constitutionally, one of the easiest ways to do that, just to make our province a little bit bigger. Maybe look at the territories. Maybe it's time to redraft what those lines look like. Then maybe you can have Saskatchewan and Alberta having deep sea port access again and get some salt water. So some pretty non-conventional ideas, but as I kind of put it to some of my colleagues, 6 years ago, no one was talking about corridors, so maybe we should start talking about what the new Canada can look like, what we can do to develop the North and be part of it. So with that, thank you very much. Enjoy the evening. And I'm ready for all your questions. Yes, ma'am.
What is stopping the federal government from putting in a tanker ban in the corridor?
Yeah, so the question was, what's stopping the federal government from putting in another tanker ban in the Northern Corridor? Pure and common sense. Like, they've already done that. So that was one of the items that we said that has to be off the table. You have to allow our product to move. And when you've got premiers like Wab Kinew, who's turned out to be really good, by the way. Like, there was some trepidation when he got in. We weren't sure how that was going to work. But when we've got an MVP Indigenous premier talking about having oil in the Hudson Bay, that's a big turning point. So when we're talking about these things, we've got a lot of support now, and we've happened to sign memorandums of understanding with Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and the Northwest Territories, all in economic corridors. So we're pushing them pretty hard. Ontario, they're working on their side on James Bay. They also want energy. My counterpart that I met when I was down at the inauguration, he's working on a similar program that we are, and we're going to try to push that forward. And quite frankly, if they don't fix this, it comes apart at the seams. Like, this isn't a nice to have anymore, and you can't keep playing hostage. Our economy, our country's economy, cannot afford this. And Minister Horner had shared with us, I can't say which minister said it, but when they're sitting around the table and they're talking about the economics, and they're trying to figure out how to get out of this mess that we're into as a country, and one of his, well actually there's a couple of them, but one said it more succinctly than the rest, one of his fellow finance ministers said, the only way you're going to get out of this is to unshackle Alberta. Let Alberta do what they do best, let them build, let them get stuff to market. That's the only way we get out of this. So when they're starting to see it, their livelihoods are going to be massively impacted, because if you keep hitting us, there isn't going to be any cash. There's no more juice to squeeze out of the orange. You got to let us do what we do right, and you want to make sure that we stay strong and sovereign. All the things that we've been impeded by for a number of years of really stupid policy. So that's my hope. We've got a lot of people on side. If they want to keep doing stupid, then it's, mess around and find out time. We've got to do something a bit different.
Who's paying for the pipeline?
Private industry. Yeah, the whole model here, we've got this so bass backwards and messed up. If you look at the Transboundary pipeline, that was a $9 billion job that pushed $40 billion because you got government involved in trying to do pipeline. My model, the model that we're pitching here, isn't the government's pushing these projects, it's the government's finally stopping the roulette wheel of regulatory compliance and approvals. Put these pathways in place so everybody knows about them, make them wide enough you can build for the next number of years, lock down these things so they're actually pushed by others to make sure they're going there, have your barrels in kind so I can book value on that pipeline. I can say, move me 40,000 barrels a day. So then I become an anchor tenant, you've got those other investments coming in going, we need the energy too, let's start building up those little mid-sized companies, let's start pushing that oil in there, or the gas, or whatever else we're doing, and then they build. But the biggest thing, and I can tell you, because I sat with two of the head guys in Enbridge a number of times, NCN, NCP, and a bunch of different other lettered companies that are big ones, they look at it from the same perspective I am, because that was my industry before. If I can de-risk that front end, if they know they're basically pre-approved, and they can get those things in there, all of a sudden it makes sense again. Gateway makes sense, it's been over-engineered for years. We just have to get government out of the way, make sure that there's certainty in it, and stop playing politics with our projects. There was another gentleman back there. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What about the healthcare system?
Yeah, do you like it?
From my personal experience, it's better for me to pay for a naturopath to get a blood to see my strategy.
Yeah, I don't disagree. So if you ever heard me in the last one, it was who thinks the healthcare system works great?
Terrible. Well, you messed it up. How are you supposed to fix it?
Well, exactly. So who thinks it works great? Any show of hands?
Right now, it doesn't work for us.
Okay, good. So you're proving my.
And the reason it doesn't, Shane.
Well, hold on a sec. You're going to prove my point. Now, the second point I'm going to make, back to this first one, is if we do that, then we'll get going back and forth too quick. So back to the other gentleman's point. The other one I said to y'all was, who wants me to fix it? Okay. Now the next part of that was, are you going to let me? Because that's the challenge that we've had for years. Every time you go to touch this blessed thing, it doesn't work, and then all of a sudden you go to fix it, and then it doesn't work good enough, and you're not allowed to touch it. So that's what we're doing, is we're carving it up into 4 bite-sized chunks. That's going to be difficult for a number of folks that want this calcified cash-hungry system to stay the same way it was with very poor service. So we're changing that. And is it bad? Absolutely. And here's the Canada Health Act. Here's how stupid this gets. If I need to go through quickly and get service, and if I can't get it in my own province, I can go over to the province adjacent to me, and I can get it done there, and the province that I'm actually from will pay for it. But if I have that same private clinic, or if I have a clinic of that other province in here, then you can't do it directly. Like, this is how messed up our Canada Health Act is. So there's a number of things we got to get through. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think politicians should be in charge of healthcare?
Do you think you should elect people to represent you to address the issues you have?
I do. I do.
Okay.
And
So can you say your name? You've got a whole list. You want to come up to the front here? Come up and sit with me. Here we go. We'll have a healthcare symposium. Come on up. So say your name.
Thank you very
Now, is
much.
this going to be a debate or a question and answer? Okay. Okay, good. Let's do it. Okay, so
I'll try to
Behave. Okay.
My name's Sean. I'm from Onaway, and thank you very much, Emily Getson, for allowing me to speak. So, I have some questions about Bill 55, which is Bill 55? Oh, sorry.
So here's what folks, we talked to a number of them. Every time we reset the session, the bill starts from zero again.
It's now Chapter 10 of the Statutes of Alberta 2025. So it's the health bill that redesigns our health system. Pardon me? Again. And
Okay, so if there's going to be facetious comments, I'm going to do both. If we want to do that, then I can throw barbs as well. Or we can have a grown-up conversation and we can answer questions back and forth.
excellent, no barbs. So here's my question. Chapter 10 of the Statutes of Alberta 2025 changes the Government Organization Act. So it does a bunch of things. It has to change a bunch of other acts in order to redesign the health system as your government has conceded. Absolutely. So one of the things that Bill 55 includes, I'm just skipping to the good part because I don't want to waste your time. At page 112 of the 387 pages, Bill 55 includes a section on financial matters. So right now, the Hospitals Act has two references to the word financial. One is so that a hospital board has to do an audited financial statement, which I think we all want. We want hospitals to be accountable. And the second thing it does is it allows for financial assistance under the regulation. That's the two things, that's the two mentions. Two patients from the hospital board.
So the
Hospital board funded by the government of Alberta, your taxes and money.
let's go through this. Okay, so the concerns you have are firstly that we're changing it. We've changed on page 112, we're changing a number of acts to allow us, as you put it, to facilitate change, which people wanted us to do, so we're doing that. The second part comes on the funding, correct? So you're saying that the funding from the hospital boards, well, you're talking financials. So financials, initially you went down a rabbit hole talking about auditing, and then the next part was you were talking about, okay, so now you're talking about your concern, which is the hospital boards funding patients, that's the idea? Is anybody else unclear? Okay, everyone else is clear, I'm not? All right, keep going.
Okay.
You gotta clear me up so I understand what you're asking.
So the new bill has a whole heading about financial matters, and the references to financial matters are two new sub-ministers that oversee hospitals instead of hospital boards, which are generally doctors. So my question for you is...
The ministers don't sit on the boards though. Like we have boards assigned. We have ministries. So
and there are no...
Just to go through this, okay. Okay, so firstly...
You read the bill. I don't need to be facetious.
Well, if we want to sit down and go through a bill page by page, I'd be more than happy to do that with you. But if you want to talk in generalities for responses and why we did this, then let's do that. Okay, so yes, we have boards. Yes, we have to change other rules and regulations because a system has been set up for a long time and now we're making the changes to facilitate that. So sometimes we have politicians who are actually doctors too, but sometimes we have doctors who have never ran boards or who have never done business either as well and have never been ministers. So it's a combination effort between the two. So to say politicians are in there and doing surgery, not saying you did, but to allude that you have non-professionals going there and managing things, the structure is made in such that we can appoint people. But you have to put a head of an organization, and when you're making these changes, you have to restructure it. So that's the structuring process, not politicians in there making the call on how this is ran day to day.
So I was a law librarian before I retired. I'm very used to reading legislation, and the footprints that I read in the legislation are all setting the stage for privatized healthcare. I did receive a very kind note from your office saying that under no circumstances would Albertans have to pay for basic medical care like visiting a doctor.
Because this is where it always gets cross-threaded, so define what private healthcare is.
I don't want any of my neighbors to not be able to have surgery that they need because it will be out of pocket.
Agreed.
And the only way that they can get it
Okay.
is out of pocket
So is there-
because the funding and support for our provincial health system has not been maintained by our government. That is my concern.
No, that's not it. So here's where it gets cross-threaded all the time. Well, and that's why I gave you the blessed microphone. Like, here's the shtick. Like, we're going to do this. This is very abnormal for a politician to do this, by the way. And again, your background is law. You're going into this, and I'm a civil engineering technologist. You heard all my pitch, right? But my wife is a dentist. My mother-in-law's a retired nurse, and God rest my father-in-law. He ran Lackadish Hospital for 30 years, and he was a former military man. So I got a number of physicians that are also friends of mine. That we also have conversations with, which are a little bit different. And not everybody understands the nuances, nor do I enter into infinitesimal detail. However, the definition of where this gets to, and oftentimes it gets hijacked by, depending on if you carry a union card or not, is and this is how it typically goes. Private health care is if it is anything that's not ran by AHS and the building is not owned by AHS. That's where this starts out in. So
Half of our
to clear,
healthcare system is already
correct,
private,
and that's exactly
but
it.
public paid.
Correct. And that's the nuance. So if I go into Onaway to the clinic, the county owns that building. They pay for the docs and everything else, but you, as the person there, you're not paying for that. It's a fee for service, essentially, because the government, AHS, acts as the insurance agent. So if we're going to put hospitals, and if you want the service from a hospital, it also goes with a whack load of overheads. Like, to actually run that thing, the operation and maintenance isn't just the nurses and the doctors, it's everything else that goes with it. So you've got a massive cost over here on that side when you're trying to get service there. The person, and I've heard lots of stories, and I've got a number of constituents back there that just want service. I want that too. They won't be out of pocket, but we've got to fix the system. Now, there's another model, if you take, to this nice lady's point here, a private doctor's clinic, because that's what they are, because AHS doesn't own it, and neither does the government. Every physician is a private doctor. They get billed. You, as the patient, go in, you get paid by your taxes, pay for that, regardless of whether you go into a hospital or whether you go into a clinic, and nothing's changing. We're setting the framework up, and I'll give you 100% Getson guarantee, because I'll fight tooth and nail for it. We're not changing that system where you have to go and pay for it. But we do want to get people the options to get in there and get your stuff taken care of with all these other limitations. So with that, we'll follow up further, but I want to go on to the next question if you're okay.
Tell me who's going to pay for my COVID shots.
You are. Because we wasted hundreds of millions of dollars throwing away COVID. All right, who's up next? How was that for a pivot for a farm boy with cowboy boots to dump into another file? And this is the fun. Whoever else wants to be an MLA, that's what you got to do. You got to be on there. You might not know everything, but you have to have at least an ability to do it and not shy away. Did you have something?
I just want to speak to the other end of healthcare.
Okay, this healthcare is a good one. Here we go.
So the other end of healthcare is that I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what it actually is. So every physician is a private corporation. Half of our healthcare system is private, but our tax dollars pay for it. Under the changes of the new government, the new changes with the current government, they're doing the right things. And so we talk a lot about healthcare and hospitals. When you talk about healthcare, you think hospitals. We need community-based care. And the current government is doing a ton of work to support community-based care. If we keep all of us healthy in the community, we don't need to end up in the hospital. And so I think that's what people don't understand. The health care that we need is not hospital care. You don't get to the hospital until you're sick and it's too late. We need to keep you in community. Where are our doctors in community? Evansburg, that's where I live. Our physician is retiring at the end of June. It was a struggle to get replacements for it. That's where our focus needs to be. It's not about hospital care, because by the time you get there, it's too late. There's so many programs right now that are trying to focus on community-based care, and I just think that's where our focus needs to be as a community.
We did a lot of work on this too, folks. Like again, when I'm talking about going out in corridors, our health people also did that as well. And one of the numbers that came back, which was pretty wild, Germany again came up. They're really good at healthcare. They run a different system than us. They're about 66% less overheads than what they run their healthcare system than we do. The system we put in place here currently, Australia did it a number of years ago. When they did it about 20 years ago, within the first year, they saw about 15 to 20% reduction in wait times. So this is why we're pushing this forward. There's going to be a lot of churn. There's going to be some hurt feelings here and there, but God's honest truth, it's to make sure that all the money that we spend as taxpayers, that when you need the healthcare system, you get it. And don't get fixated on which building you go into, because it's not going to come out of your pocket. You're paying for it, you deserve to get it when it's there. Let us sort out those other details. You got to have a little faith with us too. Again, we're changing this thing mid-flight. It's not like we can just park the entire system and not keep going forward with it. So there's going to be a little bit of turn as well. Who has another question? There you go. There's one for you, sir.
What happened to the older pension plan?
Oh yeah.
Let's pull out of it. Let's get out of it.
You know, best idea ever. Have a town hall in a bar. Another round. It's truth serum. This is good. No, I don't have that budget, Mayor. Another round of waters for the mayor. Go ahead, sir. So it was on the Alberta pension plan? Okay, so I think I was one of the only UCP MLAs that did town halls on it, and went out because I was hearing all this stuff about everybody was against it. I didn't hear that in our area. And I even went into St. Albert, and there was NDP colleague there with a bunch of her supporters that came out to try to hijack this thing. And by the end of the meeting, it was about half of them were on my side too, just having the conversation, because that's part of the issue. We don't talk enough, we talk past each other. So where we got with that, we did our study, we did our actuary, we put the numbers out there, and then it was a moving target, right? So we kind of locked that in at a certain time and place, kind of saw what that bandwidth was, and we kind of went from there on that. And then we needed to compel the feds to go and do the same thing to come up with their numbers. Well, they came up with numbers, but they haven't shared them with us yet. So now, yeah, I know, and it's wild, right? Now, our concern was that other government could potentially change the rules by the time we got to the negotiating table to have a conversation with them. That was one of the concerns. The other one was the other side jumped out way in advance and didn't want them changing a blessed thing, and they honestly got there and got folks steered a certain direction rather than just giving the information to make a decision on. So where are we at? I think there's another resurgence in it. I think we've been pressed enough that folks are asking, what are we doing with this pension plan now? Because again, lots of folks are talking about, I'm not necessarily doing it, I'm a builder, not a person that takes things apart, but there's a lot of folks talking about separation if we don't get things done here. So that also is very near and dear to everyone's hearts. And I can tell you full well, doing the Alberta pension plan is a pen stroke. That's only 1 year notification that we do that. The feds have to cash out. The nuance comes of what they're actually going to give us for chips once we go to that little window in the casino and ask what do we actually have left for our chips there. To pull out of the country and do all that other stuff, like it makes Brexit look like a handshake. That's where it gets complicated. So if there's still concerns, if people are still wanting to do that, then let's start having that dialogue. The other thing that we did on the Elections Act, where there was a bunch of and I was actually on the Sean Newman podcast today too, and he asked some similar questions. So we changed a bunch of the electoral reform items at the same time. And anybody who thinks that we can predict when the Liberals are going to call a snap election and punt one leader up, get another one in, and think that we just orchestrated that to have at the same time. Like, if you think a government's that organized, I can tell you full well it isn't. We don't talk that much, the other guys. But we're working on this anyway, and once it hits our legislative calendar, then we can actually use that system to try to move things forward a little bit faster, depending on where it's at. So that's what we did on that side to make sure it was timely. But we also noticed that Mayor Gondek down south, she had a bit of a run on her for recall. And when we started looking at the act, the thresholds were so blessed high that it didn't seem to make a bunch of sense. So we think we brought it back within a bandwidth that's reasonable. So if you have an idea, like locking the time in so we don't have to do daylight savings and spring ahead, fall back, you can do that, get enough signatures, put it on there. It goes on to a referendum, and then ultimately all Albertans answer that question. So if there were other items that folks wanted to bring up and put on that referendum, then God bless you, and creeks don't rise, do the right things to get it out there. If we're having enough conversation on it again, I would be more than happy to start that conversation again and see where we're at in the process and get people the information so they can be more informed.
building all this. What makes you think the world government is going to talk to Alberta and not want to talk to the Canadian government?
Well, they do both, but it comes down to which jurisdiction. So again, most of the folks, they want clean water, they want food, and they want energy. All of that's within basically the energy part, right? That's what we talk about and what we're growing. That seems to be first and foremost. If they're talking international trade relations or boundaries or, you know, bugs and bunnies or fish in the ocean, that's not our department. They can talk to them about that. So it's a twofold conversation, and that's where it works really well when we have good ambassadors and we have good bureaucrats on that side, and we can actually show up and do that. What we found is that when we don't have somebody in those offices and we're not there, invariably what happens is they talk about Quebec and Ontario quite a bit. So as an example, our own embassy in Berlin, I was there, right next door to Hitler's old bunker, by the way, if you're ever over there. Pretty neat part of history. Like, it's literally the parking lot by the Canadian embassy is where all that took place. But sitting in there, there's a nice big bear. They got, you know, the RCMP bear there. They've got a bunch of other different things. They got across the way from the US Embassy, it's right there. And then you look a little further down, and then there's the Quebec Embassy. So I'm looking at that. We know how we pay our taxes. You know where it goes. And so then I go into the building, we're meeting with our folks that are supposed to be talking about how they're engaging with the Germans on a bunch of different files, including energy and mining and hydrogen and everything else. Everything that they were talking about was all about Ontario and Quebec. And at the same time, on the other side of their mouth, they're mad because Quebec represents themselves. And I'm going, well, here's all the stuff we're doing. How do we tie in? So my facetious part, and again, when I'm leaving that building, I have a bunch of these little Alberta flags. I was planting them everywhere, so I was getting pictures taken with our Alberta flag and the embassy everywhere. But my concern was, kind of to your point, I'm paying the taxes, it goes to the federal government then promotes Quebec and Ontario for the most part, and they forget about Alberta, and I'm even paying for the Quebec embassy. So if we don't show up at these things, we don't have these conversations, those other parties, they don't know any different. They think those people talking about all of those items, not just our jurisdiction, all the items, they fill that void. So that's why the doors are opening to us. That's why we're more bold. We have 17 offices now out there globally, and we're out there, we're hitting the pavement, we're doing that, and that's the Premier's file. And that's why we're showing up and having those conversations. So they want the conversations with both. They know they have to navigate it, but when it's talking about energy, Premier holds the pen on that one.
So typically, those countries deal with countries, we can deal with like individual, like Canada's scratch.
Yeah, no, it's both. So what happens at these events, like it's subnational to subnational, it's really easy. So if I'm a province and I'm dealing with another state within a country, we can sign those deals all day long, depending on like memorandums of understanding, different sister cities, exchange of universities. Universities are really good for going back and forth. Like there's different levels that we work with. Those can happen all day long. When it hits national defense, that's a different question and conversation altogether. So that's where these guys know through protocol and the bureaucracies of which level they engage with us. And again, the vacuum, the void that's been there is the items in the province that we are in our control. We just haven't shown up to the dance and we haven't talked to folks before. Now we're doing that, so now they know when they're talking energy or they're talking ag or they're talking those things, they're talking to us.
So you need a playbook to deal with Canada.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like every.
These other countries, they need a playbook.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and that's the subtleties. Like when you start doing these events where we had the president of Korea came to this event, Premier Health, there's an entire protocol office that gets involved too, because there's a ton of pomp and circumstance of who you sit beside each other, who's first in line when you go into a room. There's a ton of that stuff. They've been figuring this stuff out for years, so you and I don't have to. There's an entire industry around that. So when you go in those rooms, those folks kind of set the field, and then it's up to us to assert ourselves in those areas where we have those conversations. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so the question was, what's going to happen with Mr. Guilbeault? I call him the Green Gremlin, by the way. That's my nickname for him. Wow. Yeah, it's tough to imagine that guy. So yeah, he's running around and he's going to censor your internet. He's going to give you free park passes, and he's going to go out there and stake flags and plant new parks. Not in Alberta. Like, I'm more of the ilk that when we saw how Jasper was managed, here was one of my pitches. You know, bounce it off you here. Why don't we just repatriate the park? So it's actually provincial, province, ended up working with the feds, made it a national park. Since they couldn't manage Jasper, and Jasper's a municipality, and we got all this nuance and back and forth, why don't we just put a bubble around the highway, and why don't we put a bubble around that town? That would be what I would do to solve that. So if there's an event of fire, break glass, the the province doesn't have to wait to try to get a hold of whichever prime minister or whichever minister does want to pick up the line. We can actually put people's houses out. Like, that would be my idea. But as far as Kibo running around and staking claim in parks, I think there's a different agenda that's taking place there. We managed to shut that down and change the legislation in Edmonton. We're not going to allow Minister Kibo to go out and claim more territory in the province of Alberta. And if there's anybody in the back there, I'm not sure. It's like an auction, Kevin. I'm not sure if you asked or you flinched, but I caught you because there's a sunlight. If I'm missing anybody in the back, just let me know. I'm trying to watch line of sight here, so I feel like an auctioneer here. Okay, yes, go ahead. C2 or C5?
Can you tell us what the,
Wait, which one's C2?
can you tell us what the question is?
The 10,000 limit? Maybe, do you want to say what that is?
Donation. Cash donation.
So C bills are federal bills, and then our bills are just numbered. So that's where there's a little bit of a different nuance. So I know some about what's happening at the federal, but not in detail. And even with ours, like, you'll have some pretty big bills. I'll know some, but unless I'm physically going through it again, you have to understand there's a number of bills we pass at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning as well. So C2, I'm not sure on that one. If you're talking about, I think it was 54, which was ours, that electoral reform, there was, this gets pushed back and forth a number of times because someone had mentioned donations. So where it was currently sitting is that you can only donate as a person. And what happened was businesses, small businesses or otherwise, were not allowed to donate in the process. But there was these things called political action committees. So these PACs were being formed. And then those PACs were going out there spending a whack load of cash on elections that were, I would suggest, kind of dark money because they didn't have to declare it the same way. So what we did was said, okay, enough. Oh, and some of the union hands, and I knew some folks here, they didn't realize that prior to us changing some rules, they were no longer allowed to have an open vote. They had to have their hands up. They couldn't have secret ballots when they were voting. And a bunch of their money off every paycheck was from their unions given to one particular political persuasion without their knowing about it. So we changed that so at least you guys can opt out, private ballots or secret ballots and all that. So coming back to the voting thing, or the donation thing, so what had happened is it was based as an individual, you had all this other stuff happening behind. What we did was brought it out into light and said, okay, if you're a union or if you're a business, then you're treated like a person. You're only allowed X number of dollars and you have to declare it. So that way it takes it out of a bunch of these PACs, it puts it out in the daylight, and then at least you can track it through the elections, makes it a little easier for everybody. Yeah. Well, there's one back here.
Can you just please tell us what the question is? That we don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, you're perfectly right. And then just to compound it, we got another corridor going right by us here. So the question was, back in the corner, they want me to repeat it so everybody can hear. What I understood the question to be was, what was the bill that changed the donations? And I think I stumbled through that to explain typically what most of the questions come into the office were. Did you have another one back here? And then C5. C5 is, just maybe I'll come back to you if I can. Now C5 is another one that's out there that Carney threw out and basically said, you need to declare projects of interest as provinces because you're kind of the problem, and if you declare these projects, then we'll help you guys stumble along and get through it. And we'll give, maybe if we have consensus, then we'll maybe say it's a project of national interest. I'm butchering it, being a little facetious on it, I apologize, but that's basically what they said. The Prime Minister has always had the pen to say it's a project of national interest is going through. We've always been asking for these corridors, these economic models that we've had. They are a national interest. So a lot of this, we want to make sure that that's not the distraction, that he doesn't build up something new that we don't need, quite frankly. What we need is common sense again. We need them to get on side with what our requests are to get this thing unshackled and moving forward. So you'll hear Bill C5 out there. That's what's taking place out there as well. Yes, ma'am.
When or how can we get our roads fixed?
Which road?
Every road.
Yeah, well, so great question, right? Yeah. So the question was, how can we get all of our roads fixed? I like the same thing. I like to ride motorcycles too. We had one of the most clever ones. It was, and again, you guys, we get some pretty cool emails and letters into our office. Some not so much. The form letters that some send in, don't do that. If I'm getting one from Calgary and it's the same form letter you're sending, quite honestly, you're about 500 deep in the day. If I see your name at the top and said, I need help on my road, here's the location, it almost caused an accident, that thing goes right to the top of the pile. Because anything that has to do with safety or along those lines, then we're going to take care of it. Like, that's a priority for us, so that's what we try to do there. But one of the cleverest ones to talk about on Highway 22 by Lazy S, we know it's a bad spot, we got funds for it. Michael Botris is an awesome guy, he's going to get this damn thing fixed, we've all been hounding him for it. So he's going to get that done, and I even took this one note, and I'm going to butcher it a bit, Kristen, I apologize. But basically the guy said, and I'm going to paraphrase, but basically he said, this road is so bad that I hurt myself, my male reproductive organs, and my wife had to take me to the hospital, and then the hospital had to, and he goes through the list of all the time, and he says, now I'm off work because of this damn road. Like, if I'm going to have my reproductive unit working again properly, you got to fix this road. Well, he did it in such a polite and clever way. I mean, I'm splitting a gut laugh, and I'm going, holy jeez. I sent it off to the minister, the chief of staff, and I'm going, Josh, this is urgent. Like, we got a medical issue now out of this. Oh my God, he's going through, because safety's a big thing for us, right? And, you know, he goes through, he's like, he wants the road fixed or give him more peas for his problem. And I'm going, yeah, frozen peas, Josh. So I sent it, and we sent it off, obviously, to the inspector for the area, and he actually got on it, and he comes back, and he had a nice tongue-in-cheek. He says, yes, it's bad. Thankfully, my suspension was better, but I did have a cooler full of frozen peas just in case. So sometimes when you send these through and you have a little bit of a sense of humor to it, it helps. But we are, God's honest truth, trying to fix what we can. Typically, that safety is one of the priorities as well. And then, obviously, Alberta had a whack load of roads. We paved and paved and paved and paved. We don't have the economy we used to back in the day. Now we've got a bunch of these roads, and you have to try to prioritize. And then there's a balance between the municipal side, the provincial side, the federal side, depending on the road, and obviously the counties as well. So we're trying to do what we can. If there are issues, depending on the number of the roads sent to our office, we'll try to put it through. But yeah, if you know which road it is specifically, and you've got an issue, and you can take a picture of it, talk about frozen peas maybe, I don't know. But sometimes it helps in that way. Mayor? You have frozen peas with you, Mayor?
No, I don't need those bits of blocks anymore.
I never assume. I just ask the question on the vegetables.
Very good. This question goes to a bigger question, and that is the astronomical, and my count doesn't appreciate my comment, astronomical infrastructure deficit in this province. What are we going to do in the remaining time of this UCP government term? What are we doing to try to address a more than $30 billion infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the mayor asked, what are we going to do for the massive infrastructure deficit? So again, it comes down to priorities. Which ones are safety issues? Which ones are commerce issues? Which ones maybe don't we need anymore? Like, when we start talking about how many numbers of little bridges we have out there that are going to have to be done, either you're fixing them all and we run a massive deficit and we do it all at once and we don't have the money to pay for it, and we know how that goes, or maybe we look at what we're using them for and start looking at the business cases. So there's a bit of that. Internally, there's also a bit of horse trading that takes place. When we're trying to get projects of national interest, we're also trying to get money back from the feds. By the way, that's your money. Every federal dollar we get back costs us about $1.30, so spend it well. I mean, we're always working on those things. So Mayor, I don't have the silver bullet for it. It is literally a problem. One of the other things that I would love to see happen, and the road building community brought it up, there's a couple things. So firstly, make sure the cost of the projects are relative, that we don't try to inherently push a ton of the risk over the contractors, whether force majeure, tariffs, because all the contractors can do, they can't figure it out any better than we can, so they just elevate the price. The other one is in the working window, so making sure that on quasi-rain days, that they don't count as full production days when they're out on those lines, so that doesn't go against their overall production days, which then have liquidated damages on the back end. So if it's a little bit of rain and drizzle out there, you might not have the whole paving crew going, but you might have the sign crew going. So some of those contracts needed to be fixed up as well, that you allow that work to take place. And then the other one on the tariffs, there is no way we should be asking a contractor to take the risk on tariffs when we don't even know what's going on. So right-sizing some of those. And then the other ones that came back were, maybe if you put programs together that weren't annual budgets, like nobody else can plan for major infrastructure projects year to year and how it may swing. When we first got in there, though, we did prioritize roads, and there was a nice little calculation, a nice little spreadsheet that went to the wayside. We brought that back, and it was more critical to talk about the economy, it was more critical to talk about structural deficits, and also safety. So those things go to the top of the pile versus whoever wanted to show up at a ribbon cutting. Long answer is we don't have all the cash to do it all at once. We're gonna have to make sure that we all take a little water in our wine and be realistic on what our expectations are, and then make sure that those are covered. And maybe some of the other ones, maybe we don't need them right now. And then the other ones where they're of critical import, sometimes your MLA supports things like the Vinca Bridge in Fort Saskatchewan to be done rather than a small little back road, because we're trucking things 200 kilometers around and we can't get modules going, and I can't get that feeding out to our stuff out here if we have that congested. When we start looking at these elements, it goes outside of our constituent boundaries too. Highway 60 is a prime example. Look at all the work that was going on the main highway up in Devon, and now we're going to have that overpass finally. Finally, the overpass, I mean, we're working on that, right? And that leads into Highway 16 here as well. So, long answer, but no quick solution. Yes, ma'am.
What about the orphan wells that are all over Alberta?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those are terrible. So there's the question was, what about all the orphan wells? So there was a bit of a nuance that went through that. So some of the bigger companies, they were kind of capped on production at that time when oil was at a negative value. But the little guys managed to keep going, so we tried to keep the lights on. For the small and medium-sized producers, the counties were also gracious enough, the councillors as well from the municipalities, to relieve taxes for a number of times, so these guys could try to get themselves out of the hole. And it was supposed to be based on goodwill for the most part. Majority of them did have goodwill. Well, majority of them did pay their back. Now we've got some problem guys, and I guess it's now Minister Williams, it was McIver there a little while ago, is working with the counties to try to figure out if we can get a bigger map and get that sorted. The other one on the orphan wells, I'm not sure if you're talking about the quantity, so how many wells that people can have or companies can have in relation to how many they've cleaned up. Those metrics were changed as well. There's been a couple of items out there talking about when they become orphan wells. So the Orphan Well Association is paid for by the association, by all the oil companies, right? That's how that's paid. And then the money, these cleanups are managed typically by a government agency that does that. So some of the things that I come across my desk were pretty novel. It was saying sometimes when these groups, they have these orphan wells, there's some productive wells too. They're not just bad wells, some are productive. What they were proposing is to take and basically free the good ones, free the good orphans from the orphanage by putting them back into production to allow other companies that could pay for the cleanup or to pay for the insurances to take them over again. So there's a number of things that are being worked on. Stay tuned. Yes, sir.
From a completely different direction. Currently, there's a worldwide shortage of about 250,000 commercial pilots. Alberta has more airports than almost anywhere else. Alberta, in 1939 and 1945, trained 140,000 air crew in this province. Seems to me we have the facilities, the weather, the history, and the ability to fill that need. I've had many friends come from places like Malaysia in past years to get their commercial license, because a Canadian commercial license is one of the most highly valued anywhere. Meantime, we have airports that are quiet. Belleneu's much better, but it's not exactly leaving the burnout. We have Drayton Valley, Whitecourt, Mayorthorpe, all over the place. We have 5,000-foot airports that aren't reaching anywhere near a level that it's a payback. What can we do, or has anybody even looked at? What can we do?
Okay, just for the record, I didn't set this guy up as a planted question. This is actually legitimate coming from him. So he's asking about all the infrastructure that we're not using in airports because we've got an international deficit of pilots. Talking about the attributes of how many pilots we used to train, conflict periods, everything else, and it's because of a lot of the God-given attributes. Lots of big airspace, good weather, the open areas, we built the infrastructure, province turned a bunch of these things back over either to counties or communities and those type of things. And then it was talking about some of the small early wins that we've had at Villeneuve as an example, and why aren't we doing that elsewhere, and has anyone thought about this? So perfect question, and Brenda, I didn't set this up. On God's honest truth, so folks that don't know, I have my own little airplane. One of the best things I've ever done. My family, meeting my wife was number one. Getting my pilot's license and flying that little airplane all over the place is number two. One of the things that we did, so as the only flying MLA in the House right now, what we did during COVID when that was all taking place, everything was kind of shut down. If people remember those dark days, there was a number of us that came up with our pilot's recurrency. We had to do the rust remover, and we had to modify it. So we got a bunch of air traffic controllers, we had a bunch of us pilots, we had some stunt performers, we had some military guys, got around the table and said, okay, how do we do this? How do we do this recurrency training and still meet these requirements? So that was the first hurdle. We did that, and the next thing that happens, no different than folks coming to a nice little, we're in the Gainford bar, by the way. So come into the bar and you have some good conversations and that social lubricant gets going, you come up with some pretty creative ideas. And anyone who's really smart has actually taken notes there. So hopefully somebody's taken notes at your table for all this tonight. So we started taking some notes and we said, well, to your point, what can we do for these communities? What can we do to raise awareness? Because most of us are getting gray haired and we don't have new people coming in, and there's 3,200 pilots short, 3,500 AMEs short, got a ton of technicians that are short. If like the Tata family is, buying 300 737s at a time, they need all these pilots. To your point, we were seeing our own aviation industry at the time was down, but all this glut of pilots, China was gobbling up a bunch of them. We had efficiency. So we said, well, what can we do locally to bring a little joy back into it, to bring the spirit of aviation back, and to do that. So in 2019, 2020, we did the COVID-wide tour. We literally went around Edmonton, we went out to Drayton Valley, was one of our very first stops. And what we did, now this is where the sales pitch comes in. So I tell people, you're two types of people in the world. You're either a pilot or you want to be. So most people, yeah, I mean, honestly, and this gentleman gets it. So part of the issue is there's this stigma, like many things, whether it's firearms or whether it's horseback riding or whether it's surfing, whatever your thing is, right? There's these little clicks, and aviation is one of those. Motorcycles are another great example, right? If you're not exposed to it, you think that it's out of your reach, and there are a bunch of snooty guys that go out there and spend $1,000 to buy a $50 hamburger somewhere and talk about how you have to support them. So what we wanted to do is turn that back in its ear. And what we grabbed was, at that time, COPA did a wonderful report talking about the microeconomics of every little airplane out there. And at that same time, we were working with that consultant at Kissimmee for the Villeneuve Landing Network to see how much money we were leaving on the table every year. So when we did this, lo and behold, $135,000 of direct revenue is generated from each one of those little airplanes that you have in your field. And then the ancillary dollars are about $250,000 plus. What happens when you've got people flying to your community? A lot of people didn't even know they had an airport that was close to them. So when we did that, we did a challenge. We said, okay, we're going to do an event. We're going to have 20 of our aircraft. I'm going to bring in one passenger each. We've got 20 new people coming to your area. What can you guys do in an open venue to tell me why I should come to your area and why you want me to come back? Like, what are some of the great things you've got going on in your community? So we had the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts were out. We had mayors and councils were coming out. They were pitching it. They were business economic development. And I said, we'll take all the pictures, because every pilot usually has a camera on their airplane. So we'll do all that. We'll give you all that information for free, all the pictures we take and everything else. And bring the kids. All those pilots will crack open their canopies and we'll stand there and we'll talk to people, and then we're going to go on to the next community. So we literally did a circuit around the city. We did that. We called it the Alberta Air Tours. And lo and behold, at Drayton Valley, as a politician, like, this is a good turnout, you guys. I normally don't get this many people coming out to a town hall, so this is pretty awesome. So thank you for that. So as a politician, this is a big deal. When we showed up at Drayton Valley, we had 300 some odd people come on out there. And we had kids lined up going through these things, and we've been doing that ever since. And we've expanded it now, so we do 3 air tours a year. We pick different airports. What we do, and we even had the mayor of Sturgeon County come out and fly with us in one of the years too. So we threw her in the cockpit, flew around the area to show her what we see. We went up to West Lock and showed the advantages of maybe having some residential housing near to your airport. Drayton Valley, you got the industrial side there. They used to have drag races on it. We went up to some orphan ones that are obviously neglected. Some of the counties and communities think they're just cash holes. That's all, you just throw money at it. And once we brought that culture there, and then you saw how many business people were looking for facilities and hangars and places to put business that they could quickly get to. So that's what we've been doing on that side. And then we had that thing called the International Air Show. Worked like the Dickens, and everybody in the room that helped out with that, God bless you, thank you for doing it. We were the only ones in North America that year that had a big air show. And we had a couple 100,000 people show up and had a little bit of freedom for that day. And Brenda Rosaduke, I'm going to point you out in the crowd, she was the head of the school board trustees out there at the time. I got her and I got her superintendent, and we got a couple military people there, we got a stunt pilot, a race pilot. We started talking about all the things that we can do in aviation and that kids don't know about. So here was the pitch. Why don't we do like an entry ground school type course within your high schools, and then we can try to connect you up with some of the pilots. We'll do a field trip every year. Come on out to Villeneuve, the MLA will take you around, show you the field, we'll do that. And then maybe we can hook up with the air cadets, so then the kids can actually do their ground school, get credit for it in high school. They can find out whether they like it or not, and we'll hook them with the air cadets, and by the time they get out of high school, then they got their pilot's license. So we did that. Brenda took that leap of faith. Give that lady a round of applause, please, for making that case. So Evansburg was the first school that did that. We now have 4 school divisions that are doing that. We have tours. Kristen, thank you so much for taking that over and doing that when I'm on the road, and we've got them out there. Now we've got the Edmonton International Airport coming out and wanting to take the lead on that, and now they've got tied in with the flying clubs. We've got 4 schools doing it, and most recently, here's the real kicker. We got funding to put a brand new school out at Villeneuve at the airport, a STEM school that's going to concentrate on aerospace and aviation. So now we're tying in with those communities, and I've had so many really good mayors that heard me do that pitch of what we can do. And the biggest conversion factor that I had, so as an MLA, go to those graduations, which I love doing, by the way. So within 3 years, it went from kids in Evansburg not talking about aviation to the last one I went to last year, 18% of the graduating class was talking about some career in aerospace and aviation.
The point I want to make is people don't realize how much an aviation community injects into a municipality. When you look at having a recognized flight school in your area, that means you're bringing, and depending on the scale, you're bringing in people from across the province, across the country, and often international, which means you have to have residents, you have to have restaurants, you have to have facilities, you're going to rent places. It's an opportunity of low-hanging fruit. Think of it. Right now, most pilots flying commercial airlines have $15,000 to $25,000, and they're reaching the end of their career. Transport Canada is going to say you can't do it anymore.
So sir, you're preaching to the converted. They applauded and everything. We're on side. What we got to do is talk to, so spread the word, and God bless you for doing it. And if we're doing more of these things, then I'm going to bring you out with me, because you could articulate from your career a lot more better than I can just as a private pilot. But I think you're in the room, coalition of the willing here tonight from what I've seen. So thanks for bringing that up. And again, it wasn't a plant, but that was a softball, actually. That was a great one, because yeah, we were on that one. Oh, yes, sir.
I know it might be beyond your capabilities, but what about being in charge of another taxes? Getting around this.
Say again, so taxes?
Okay. All this money was sent to back to Ontario.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so talking about taxes and equalization payments. So one of the reform things that the Premier put out there was, okay, we got to look at that whole equalization schema. It's not going to keep going the same way it is. The have provinces should not be treated as have-not provinces. So again, if you're a certain size, Ontario, Quebec, maybe Quebec shouldn't be getting $13 billion a year from us. Ontario, you got $500 million a year from us. Maybe we should go back to the intent of what that was, and the provinces that don't have the resources or are building or are down on their luck for a little while, maybe they should get it and not the big ones. So that's we're already addressing that. That's one of those items that we had that big joint caucus meeting on that we vehemently agree with. Anything else? I see some folks starting to leave now, so yes ma'am, and I'll come back to you, sir.
I just want to hear your opinion on Elvis. How do you...
Oh, it was an easy one. The question was, how do I personally feel about Alberta separatism? Okay, now you're going to get me in hot water because you know I answer questions. There's the answer as the MLA. There's the answer as a dad. And then there's an answer as a person who has had a family in Canada since 1751.
So tell us the answer, what's best for our kids and our grandkids?
Yeah. So the question is, what's best for our kids and grandkids? Firstly, our provincial motto is strong and free, so don't ever be a pansy and just keep taking it. Like, people got to actually get some backbone. We actually have to stand up, and it's going to get uncomfortable. We're going to get called a bunch of nasty names, but we're not talking about separation. We're talking about how the country was supposed to be done in the first place. And here's the analogy I use on that. What really concerns me, like honestly, the folks that jump up and down are mad at everything and get mad at the drop of the hat, that doesn't concern me as much as the folks like you, as an example. Everyday person that's finally reached their tipping point that goes, this is enough. Like the moms that are taking their kids to soccer and going to Starbucks and saying like, this is enough. It's not the 6'2" pipeliner that's rhyming things with truck and kicking something on site. Like that's, and then there's getting to be lots of them. If you look at the polling, that's the issue. And the way I kind of put it, and I said it today, was like, okay, who's seen Old Yeller? Okay, all you guys, how many guys cried at Old Yeller?
All of them.
Right? Yeah, like we're softies, right? So the way I kind of put it, and it's like whether you're a man or a woman or a mom or a dad, it's that nurturing thing. The whole thing of why it gets us an Old Yeller is because that was the family pet. Like that young man was coming up and his little brother and all that stuff, and he's got to take care of the farm while his dad's away, and they got this rascal old dog and he wants to get rid of it, and he falls in love with it, and it's such a good family pet, and then it saves the family, and for its trouble, turns rabid, and then he has to put it down. That's that sadness I'm talking about. Like, we'll pull the trigger, we'll get to that point, and a bunch of us are getting awfully sad that we're getting to that point. So don't test our resolve, because we'll do what we need to do to protect what we need to protect our family, to make sure nobody else gets harmed. And I kind of akin that with the country. If the country is working properly, we don't have these issues. If the federal government wasn't doing overreach, we don't have these issues. If you didn't have people getting hijacked in the message, like they've been doing for the last 10 years, we don't have these issues. We just want to earn. Just unshackle Alberta, let us do the right things, and here we go. So when I'm talking about pushing boundaries and trying to foolproof Canada 2.0, and if I'm looking at some of the issues where we've got restrictions, we can't get to deep sea port, we can't get assets and all those things, that's what I'm saying. Well, maybe the easiest thing is to redraw those boundaries. So I'm a builder by nature. I think we have way more to offer. And most times when I'm talking about building, I don't go past further east than Hudson Bay. If I get Hudson Bay, the Arctic, and the Pacific, I'm a happy camper. And our trade corridors, the best ones go north and south. We eliminate the east-west trade barriers. We've got less free trade in our own country than we do with foreign nations. We eliminate all those things. We stop these frivolous tanker bans on one commodity off our coast. Let us get trading where we need to, these other areas. Let us be the meat and sandwich between Alaska and Montana. Let us do the things we're supposed to do. And I think part of the challenge where all the elbows up crowd got all choked is because Big Brother across the corner said, clean up your room. I'm tired of fighting your battles for you, and I'm tired of paying for you because you run out of money in your own allowance. That's where we got indignant. So instead of going, ugh, you're right, doing the grown-up thing and going, yeah, let's clean up our room, let's pick up our socks, and let's do this here, we all jumped up and down and said, how dare you? Well, there was a lot of valid points. So I honestly believe that as a young country, like to put it quite frankly, in Europe, there's outhouses older than our country. So maybe it's a point where we've got to this point, we're still pretty young. Maybe it's to honestly look at what we want to be when we grow up and start putting that framework in place. And I would hope that the people that are sad see some of that wisdom and that thing so we can point their efforts. Because the other problem that I have, and again, coming back to that handshake thing, if you get to that point, and if Albertans call that decision, then I'm compelled, basically, to go execute it. Now, you have to give me not a suicide mission. I mean, we're struggling over the Alberta pension plan, but people are talking separation. So we're talking healthcare reform, and we've got tons of different opinions. That is milquetoast compared to what people are asking for. So if you pull that question and you hit that big button, it's not all fairy tales and pixie dust, and not everything just changes overnight. And it's how are you seen by everybody else? Those conversations we're having, are we a banana republic, or how do you do that? We're just going to say we've said it, so we're going to negotiate with the next federal government for the next 30 years. Like, we're already negotiating, so give me an end-sum solution that I can execute. And I know my grandkids and great-grandkids will be fine. And I'm not, at this point in time, willing to risk it. But if Old Yeller needs to be put down, Old Yeller needs to be put down. But let's do everything we can before we have to get there. I got a gentleman over here, and I'll come back to you, because you've asked one before. This gentleman's new, I think. I got a bit of a light here, sorry.
What are we going to do to promote and incentivize the trades going forward?
Oh, right on, great question.
Everybody wants to sit behind a desk, nobody wants to work with their hands, the world's just going to fall apart.
God bless you, brother. So the question was, what are we going to do to incentivize the trades? Because if you keep saying that everyone needs to sit behind a desk, all this falls apart and do that. So honestly, back to back, both administrations that I've been involved with, we've talked about parity of esteem, so we've done that. When I was sitting at, oh shoot, it was really late at night. It was like one of those 1 o'clock in the morning things. Minister LaGrange was the Minister of Education. And I kind of came up and I said, you know, our education system's messed up. I said, we're really good at playing snakes and ladders. You're not really good at promoting project teams. You're not really good at promoting people. Kids don't know what they can be when they grow up because no one's telling them what they can be when they grow up, and we're looking down on people. And I said, most times, people that are the head of companies either come from the engineering side, they come from the business side, or they come from the trade side. And I said, the best ones, the best CEOs, come from the trades and manage to get those other two together. I said, what we should be doing is not creating more university professors, we should be creating more business owners, people that can go along there and to know they got a good career path. And if you've got skills and attributes on one side of that ledger, one of those three streams, they should be recognized and acknowledged on those other ones so they don't have to go all the way to the bottom and start over again. I was very forceful in a number of these things. A couple of days later, she comes up and goes, about that conversation. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. And she goes, no, you're right. She goes, so I want you to lead a task force. I want you to take and put your ideas into effect. And the only things you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to change the curriculum and you're not allowed to tell teachers how to teach. But other than that, carte blanche. So that's what we did. I was on the Skilled Trades Task Force, and then I led one personally that was on the Careers and Education Task Force. And that literally looked at all of the trades, all of the skills that we have, how they're integrated, and how you have envelope funding for schools that are actually going to pick that up. So Minister LaGrange managed to put 8 of those things into effect before we had the election. And then Premier Daniel Smith gave both the Advanced Education Minister and the Education Minister mandates to put that into effect. So that's what we're doing on that side, and you're absolutely right. Whether you're pulling wrenches or welding pipe or pushing paper, it doesn't matter. You need to be part of a team to do it. And there's lots of people that we need to have that. So part of that system, I think, over the years, and we noticed that the European model is different. When you talk to an engineer in Europe, they've got 1 year of a trade that's mandatory. Over here, we've kind of changed that. So getting that parity, when you talk to most engineers over in Germany or in Europe as an example, they usually tell you what their trade is, and then they say that they're engineer afterwards, because that's how they look at it. So we got to try to change that a bit. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, this lady here.
So the Alberta government is incentivizing the data centers. How are you doing that?
Incentivizing what, sorry? Oh, data centers. Okay, so there's a question about data centers. Basically, what we're saying is bring your own power. So those data centers that bring their own power, because our grid can't contain or can't hold enough of the electricity we need. We know we can't build it quick enough. So then we're going to incentivize them by bringing their own power. And then we've got some really good municipal partners that also help fast track project approval, so kind of pre-approve those areas. And the other one is we make sure that they're in areas that aren't deficit in power, so you're trying to match those up. And that seems to work really well. So the big idea behind the data centers is, okay, we talked about pipelines and everything else, and if I want to move gas, it's pretty difficult at this point. We're sitting on oceans and oceans and oceans of gas that we can't use, quite frankly. I can convert that gas into electricity, and then that electricity then converts over to computations. Those computations, pound for pound, are far exceed the value of that gas ever would. So what we're doing is we're selling bits and bytes that can go down those fiber optic pipes and are highly coveted and highly valued and traded around the world. Because again, when you pick up your phone right now, AI takes 10 times the amount of power that a regular computation takes. And AI is taking off like crazy, so everybody needs this. So being a place where it's cold, where there's access to energy, making sure that we've got a low tax jurisdiction, and a bunch of those pre-approved sites, we want to work with them. That's what's going to help incentivize and bring folks here, and that's why they're looking at us. Any other last ones? There was one here.
So, October 2025, 2/3 of rural Alberta is going to be deemed criminal to do with gun control. What's Alberta's response? I know it's gun control.
Over my dead, cold hands. Yeah, so we're pushing back on that one pretty hard. Saskatchewan's in the same place. They called their minister the Minister of Guns. We've got Minister, they called him that. It wasn't his official title, so I'll go look it up. And then we've got Minister Mickey Amory. So there was a couple things. Firstly, they tried to do the gun grab. They were going to send the RCs out. And that was even Tyler Shandro at that time. Minister Shandro said, no, actually the RCs work for us. And you're not going to waste their time and resources going around taking people's property. And then we there was another task force I was on, was firearms task force. And then we got our own CFO put in place. So we've got Terry Bryant, who's phenomenal. So instead of having somebody that's appointed by the feds, we have ours, because that's in our wheelhouse, and she's more of a firearms advocate and represents us and educates and does that. So that was that side of it. If the federal election went differently, the feds were going to take our policies and implement them. So we were very much tied in there. So now we've got some headwinds there, unfortunately. The other one comes down to how far do we push the property rights? Like, I don't know. Who would be interested in joining the Alberta Corps, the Alberta Guard? Who would be interested in having a Alberta firearms license? Like, there's a number of different things that are within our wheelhouse that we can do that we're going to keep pushing back. And we even went so far as having our own Bill of Rights, noting that firearms were part of that, the proper use and legal use of firearms. We support that. So we're going to keep pushing back because it's a property rights thing to me. And the firearms owners, you guys are scrutinized more than anybody else in that database. Your name is scrubbed every single day. You're the safest, most upstanding citizens in our country. And if they're able to take away your property, that's the canary in the coal mine for me. So we're going to keep pushing back as much as we can. And everybody go buy a leaky canoe. Don't register these damn things. All right, so anybody else that hasn't asked questions, I'm going to keep going here for a little bit. There's a few more. Those that are leaving, thank you so much for coming out and sticking around this long. God bless you, and let's keep Alberta strong and free by keep doing more of this if we can. Yeah, so the question was where are we at with UNDRIP? UNDRIP is some pretty scary stuff. Our ministers are trying to work through that. That's all I can say for now.
And the municipalities, when like last week we were out of the green sustainability part of it, where are we as a whole in Alberta, the municipalities on that? Do they understand it? Do they know it?
Yeah, so the municipalities have their own Rural Municipalities Association, municipal, they have a ton of debate like we are having here when it comes to UNDRIP and what they're doing with their policies. But the ministries, it's a parent-child relationship. We have the Municipal Governance Act. So oftentimes we compare saying, well, if you talk about overreach in municipalities, then why the heck are you doing with Ottawa because they're doing the same thing? Well, it's different nuance. Like constitutionally, it's different. We have a Municipal Governance Act that puts that in control of municipalities, so we actually control the rule book. But having that, we also have some really good municipalities that run business really well. Like I would propose, there's a few outliers that we might have issues with here and there as a general public and as a government. They're the outliers. So those organizations tend to kind of trim up those things themselves. I've been to a number of those observing and hearing. Where it gets a little bit in the weeds, that's when the ministers and those representatives get together and they work through those things and kind of get to some consensus. If there's a couple items that just go off the reservation, like Edmonton was doing that on some mandates a while back, and our minister and we just changed the legislation and said, no, you're not running healthcare, that's not your wheelhouse, thou shalt not. So that's what we do when it gets to that measure where you can't come to reasonable things. Well, then I think I'm going to call it a night. We're wrapping it up and we'll talk to everybody individually. I've got to jump in my rental car to get down to Lloydminster tomorrow for 7 a.m. to be able to get my airplane back home so I'm not stuck and stranded for another day. You know, you have time to spare, go by air sometimes, and God bless our good weather, but I've got an early morning again too. So really appreciate everybody coming out and taking the time to do this, and let us know your feedback, and also who wants to do this again sometime. Marching orders, Kristen Blakeman, God bless you. This lady, all of you have talked to her probably one time or another. Kristen, you had so many accolades between you and Vicki. She's new to our staff as well. Thank you so much for coming on. These ladies run my life. They literally do the phones. They take care of all that stuff and they book my calendars. If you're calling me directly to do it, I mess it up every time and then I get a script ripped off me in the office. So there's 3 people that run my life. The other one's my wife and these 2 ladies here. And thank you so much, ladies, for everything you do to keep things going. And again, thanks to Gainford for having us. Love this place. Thank you.